Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist, and I'd like to welcome you to episode 103 of This Week in FCPA for the week ending May 18th, 2018, the Where is Uncle Duke edition. In this episode, Jay Rosen and I consider how Uncle Duke informs the compliance debate around Michael Cohen and take a look at some of the week's other top ethics and compliance stories. But first, a word from our sponsor, Affiliated Monitors. Founded in 2004, Affiliated Monitors provides professional independent integrity monitoring and ethics and compliance assessments nationally and internationally and across all industries. With its knowledge of effective ethics and compliance programs and cultures, Affiliated Monitors is respected for its work as the corporate monitor on matters ranging from multinational corporations to small and mid-sized companies and even individuals. Having served in over 700 monitorships, no one has more experience as an independent monitor than the team at Affiliated Monitors. For more information on how independent monitors can help improve your company's compliance and ethics programs, visit our sponsor, Affiliated Monitors, at www.affiliatedmonitors.com. In today's episode, we take a look at the continuing revelations around Michael Cohen and his entity, Essential Consulting. We take a look at some of the commentary around Rod Rosenstein's anti-piling on policy. We consider an article by Dan Pontefract in Forbes.com, which says compliance professionals are needed more now than ever. We consider two articles in the Global Anticorruption blog that I think decapitate the arguments against transparency into shell corporations. We consider what it's like to negotiate a FCPA and UK Bribery Act resolution at the same time in an article about the in-house counsel at InnoSpec. Trump tweets out, to protect Chinese jobs, U.S. penalties have to be lessened in the ZTE case. What are some of the implications? Ben DiPietro talks about businesses finding value in combining sustainability and compliance. Henry Cutter reports on cybersecurity whistleblowers who are becoming increasingly more important to the SEC and the corporate world. We note the Rockets squared up their series with the Golden State Warriors at 1-1, and Boston is up 2-0. Finally, and with a great amount of pride, I announced the publication of my new book, The Complete Compliance Handbook, which will be available Monday, May 28th on Amazon.com. If you're going to be at Compliance Week, I will be having a book signing party from 2:15 to 2:45. Come by and pick up an autographed copy. This is Tom Fox. Thank you for listening to this episode of This Week in Compliance. This Week in Compliance is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox. I'm the Compliance Evangelist who, together with Mr. Monitors himself, Jay Rosen, present to you This Week in FCPA, episode 103 for the week ending May 18th, 2018, the Where is Uncle Duke When You Really Need Him edition. Jay, we had quite an interesting week of ethics and compliance, so perhaps we can just jump right into it with my new most favorite reference, which is Uncle Duke. For those who don't know who Uncle Duke is, I'm sorry. You've missed out on a generation of great humor and comedy. He is Zonker Harris's, if you recognize that reference, his uncle by courtesy in the cartoon strip Doonesbury. And it dawned on me after writing a couple of blog posts this week with Hunter S. Thompson and Michael Cohen that Michael Cohen is actually Uncle Duke. So we had lots of new information about Michael Cohen. I wrote about it. Matt Kelly wrote about it. We both podcasted about it. More information on Essential Consulting, more payments to Essential Consulting. We previously heard that AT&T's head of government affairs resigned to pursue other opportunities. Now we find out that the general counsel of Novartis also has left the company over this scandal. So it's certainly costing people some jobs, and the revelations are still ongoing. We found lots of lessons to be learned for the compliance compliance professional, Jay. And I might suggest that we really hold off on going into some of those lessons because tomorrow we're going to do a Everything Compliance podcast where that's going to be the scope of the day's topic. So maybe we can take a deep dive into it. But I think really from the compliance perspective, this is the story that keeps on giving. So what's your full gonzo journalism read on this, Jay?
I just don't know where it's going to go next. And, everything that Stormy Daniels' counsel has said has come true so far. So he's doing a real great job of just letting a little string out and kind of, playing with the fishing line. So who knows what's going to be next. But, Matt's thing that we're going to link to in the show notes is he did took a view of this from the COSO framework, and then you had 3 great podcasts this week. 3 great blogs this week about going gonzo, and then also we've got a piece that you wrote about Tom Wolfe. That's I think we're going to speak about in the podcast. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So next up. I think we just covered this, but Swiss pharmaceutical giant Novartis said Wednesday that its top lawyer is stepping down over a deal to hire U.S. President's personal lawyer Michael Cohen. And quote from Felix Ehrat, E-H-R-A-T, although the contract was legally in order, it was an error, Ehrat said in a public statement, adding that he took personal responsibility to bring the public debate to an end. And Novartis, which is based in Basel, Switzerland, had hired Cohen for $100,000 per month, but determined after the single meeting with him that he wouldn't have been of any use to the company. Nonetheless, they decided to pay out the full term of the contract, which is $1.2 million with an M dollars.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So next up, we have got Rod Rosenstein's new DOJ policy against piling on. This was presented last week twice, once at, I think, a bar association and then once at the ACI. And basically, his pronouncement is a new policy to discourage piling on, which is duplicative corporate penalties, which has now been incorporated directly in the U.S. Attorney's Manual. So just like he did with the pilot FCPA program, he's making this part of the USAM. His speech identified 4 key features of the new policy, and the first is a reaffirmation of the principles of fairness that guide the DOJ, that the government will not use criminal enforcement authority to threaten companies or to gain some advantage. The second 2 features involve the coordination of investigations, including direction for different offices and components within the DOJ, that they will achieve an equitable result. And just like the Yates memo, there's going to be a focus of individual prosecution. And along with that, there are 4 factors which include the egregiousness of the company's misconduct, statutory mandates regarding penalties, fines, and forfeitures, the risk of unwanted delay in achieving a final resolution, and the adequacy and timeliness of a company's disclosure and its cooperation with the DOJ, separate from any such disclosures in cooperation with other relevant enforcement authorities. So these 4 factors are supposed to be used as exceptions to piling it on. And then I think the last thing that he really kind of left it with is that he still wants the DOJ to get their piece of the action. And, you can't cop to your misdeeds in another jurisdiction and then at that point come to the DOJ as the last stop. So we feature a really nice piece that Laura Covington and Michael Hontman wrote, which was published in the FCPA blog earlier this morning. Anything for you to add from your thoughts, Tom?
So, Jay, actually, I saw this as a couple of things. One is it's a formalization in some part of the one pie policy that Kara Brockmeyer and Dan Kahn talked about a couple of years ago at the ACI National Conference. So part of this is there should be one penalty. But the second part, which you just articulated and is found in this most excellent article, is the carve-outs from the anti-piling on penalty. So if the company's conduct is egregious, they are statutory mandated penalties, fines, and forfeitures, so there's unwarranted delay, or the adequateness of self-disclosure is found lacking, this can lead to additional penalties, or at least penalties by other agencies or jurisdictions. And I find this to be actually consistent with prior DOJ policy. But we've got all got it now in the U.S. Attorney's Manual. So I think it's a step forward. It's a continuation of what I see as consolidation and clarification by the Justice Department under Trump. And I think this is a plus for companies going forward. So, Jay, next up, we had an interesting article by someone who I don't believe we've had as a contributor to some of our podcasts previously, a fellow named Dan Pontefract, who wrote in Forbes.com, I thought a very interesting article, not in the anti-corruption space, but nevertheless very applicable to our people and our audience. It titled, "We Need Chief Ethics Officers More Than Ever." You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, the way I found this is I saw that Ellen Hunt had liked this early this morning when I was at the airport waiting for my flight to San Francisco. So I fired it up on my cell phone. And basically, Dan says that never before in history have such a small number of designers, a handful of young, mostly male engineers living in the Bay Area of California, working at a handful of tech companies, have had such a large influence on 2 billion people's thoughts and choices. And he talks about that although you may Google Chief Ethics Officer, and the first few results will highlight our friend Andy Hinton, when you go through, there are more ethics and compliance issues that programmers are dealing with. And if you're looking at things like Siri and AI, and he questions whether Google, Microsoft, or any other high-tech company in Silicon Valley has created a separate role in office outside of the compliance, regulatory, and lawyers to make ethical recommendations on whether or not a particular technology ought to come to market. So as you promised, this is more from an ethics perspective and not a legal ethics perspective. And he harkens back to the Canadian Medical Association, which first produced its Code of Ethics in 1868. So at the last part of the 19th century, and is considered the association's most important document. The code is updated every 5 years from a wide range of representatives and focuses on areas including decision-making, consent, privacy, confidentiality, research, and physician responsibilities. So he says that only then, when ethics is outside of the compliance department and it's interwoven into academic pedagogy, I hope I said that right, will society be in a better place to stem the tide of potentially unwanted technological advances. So I think this deals with a couple of concepts that you're usually talking about, embedding ethics in the business process, but this looks at a different ethics perspective.
So I found it to be a really interesting article, certainly focusing on the ethics perspective. And because it was from a field that's really outside our standard area, Jay, of anti-corruption compliance, I found it even more compelling. And that I was very intrigued by the way you opened it up, which is basically the same way the author opens it up, where you have a very small group of largely males making these decisions in these tech companies that impact literally all of us. And they're not thinking about should we do it, they're only thinking about can we do it. So very thought-provoking, and I hope people will check that out. Next up, Jay, there was 2 articles in the Global Anti-Corruption blog. Rick Messick and Matthew Stepenson both penned articles that are really in opposition to Martin Kinney, the anti-transparency apologist for the British Virgin Islands, who writes on the FCPA blog about why transparency and hiding, transparency is bad, and hiding of ultimate beneficial owners is good. And they really just take his arguments apart piece by piece. When two Harvard law professors take you on, it's never going to be a good day for your arguments, Jay. And both Rick and Matthew, I thought, did a great job. I, for one, am really tired of hearing about how the British Virgin Islands needs to be left alone because they're hiding lots of information there. There was an article by Phoebe Sears, and I think it's in GIR, MLEX. And they interviewed a fella who had been the general counsel of InnoSpec, a guy named David Williams. And David came on board in the middle of having to negotiate a settlement with the U.S. regulators, SEC/DOJ, and the UK Serious Fraud Office over corruption violations, the violations of the UN Oil for Food program in Iraq. And I thought it was an interesting article about how someone does all that and remediate a program and have a monitor and continue to report to the DOJ. So if you've ever wondered what that pressure is like, this is a pretty good article. He really talks about the sophistication and skill level of the regulators, and it was someone he could work with instead of simply someone he was working against. He talks about how negotiations worked, and I thought it was a really good article, one we rarely see because, fortunately, not many companies are in that position, but a good article about practicing law, practicing compliance under its really harshest light, Jay. Jay, last week we had a tweet by President Trump who wants to make China great again, and he wants to put Chinese workers back to work and not have the mean old American government putting them out of work because they've assessed a fine and penalty. So, of course, refer to his tweet Sunday about ZTE. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, this is just absolutely a head scratcher to me. I just don't get it. And ZTE has been penalized for, I believe, selling high-tech telephone equipment to both, North Korea and Iran. And they have been put on a sanctions list. And the president is worried about this company and putting people out of work. So, I thought his focus was mostly here on making America great again. But I don't think anybody feels this is a good idea, especially the folks in the Defense Department, that, why would you want to let a foreign adversary have direct control of our communication systems? So, I have no idea. The only thing that I'm thinking is that he needs to curry some favor with the Chinese that's going to offset things with the Koreans. But I just have no idea where this is coming from.
So really lots going on here. I think we're going to have to explore this one in a little bit later. But when the U.S. president's worried about the impact of U.S. regulations on overseas corporations, I think it can only be, as you have described, Mr. Recovering Screenwriter, a head scratcher.
All right. Do you have your white suit and white fedora on now, Tom?
I do. I am as dapper as they get. So, and of course, we are referring to Tom Wolfe. You'll be pleased to know, Jay, that I gave a speech today at the local Houston chapter of ACAMS, and they had my name tag as Tom Wolfe. And I said to the person who checked me in, I'm really honored that you think I wrote the right stuff. But I died earlier this week, so I had to send Tom Fox in my stead. So that was my
very funny.
Yes, everybody got a big kick out of that. So, but a couple of interesting other pieces in the Wall Street Journal this week, Jay. First, Ben DiPietro talked about, I found this article very interesting about the combining of compliance and sustainability. This is not something that I think many compliance officers had considered, but a CSR, a sustainability, those types of initiatives actually have lots of compliance components. So to me, it makes sort of a logical, rational program and process. But I really loved a quote from Allison Taylor, the managing director at BSR, a global nonprofit sustainability, who said that the change comes as a part of the growing recognition among multinationals that protecting their organization's reputation and mitigating risk requires a more coordinated and integrated response. And that's one of the themes I think that we have seen really throughout today's podcast, episode 103, is how compliance can really help you with that coordination and that integration of responses. Just think about, obviously, Michael Cohen, Uncle Duke, the former Novartis general counsel, and AT&T. If compliance had been allowed to do their jobs, where that would have taken them. So I find it to be a very logical and rational step. Allison Taylor writes about this quite often at BSR. So I would commend Ben's piece to you, and I would check out the BSR website. Allison and her colleagues always have some great material on there. And then, Jay, we have I thought an interesting article by Henry Cutter about cybersecurity whistleblowers are a growing corporate challenge. Really a couple of reasons. One, cybersecurity obviously is the newest thing, or as Matt Kelly might say, it's now a thing. And whistleblowers in cyber are becoming more important largely because they're filling a vacuum of company responses. Think about what's going to happen on May 25th, a week from tomorrow, or excuse me, a week from when this podcast posts. GDPR goes live. Under GDPR, you have 72 hours to formally notify the regulators of a data breach. Most U.S. companies are nowhere close to being ready to do that, and the whistleblowers are really the only way to get that information out. So we've had companies literally hide their data breaches for years. Yahoo obviously comes to mind, and I think that's what's driving, in large part, the whistleblowers, but it's also driving them to the Securities and Exchange Commission, because after the Yahoo SEC settlement, this is recognized as a securities law violation by not notifying or making a filing on it. So interesting article by Henry, always topical. So check it out.
So I think that brings us to number 9. And
number nine. Page
Golden State.
Number nine. Golden State and the Houston Rockets are tied 1-1. Yes.
And the Celtics held serve and have still home court advantage by going up 2-0 against LeBron. And didn't LeBron go crazy? Do you have a triple-double or score 36 points? So the Celtics really have been a complete surprise this year. I mean, especially with that injury earlier in the year, that horrible injury. And for them to be there now, this is all house money that we're playing with. So I hope they can take care of business. How are you feeling about the Rockets?
Well, as my wife said, why was I hearing on television that Tuesday was Game 7? It was a must-win for the Rockets. I said, because if they'd gone 0-2 at home, it would have been Game 7. But the Rockets did come back. They played fabulously well. Aside from James Harden and Chris Paul, the rest of the starters shot 70%. And you might say, well, gosh, they'll never do that again, except they've been doing it all season for 65 wins. So, you know, if the Rockets shoot 70%, if their non-stars shoot 70% and Chris Paul and James Harden get their points, they got a shot. If they don't, and Kevin Durant and the other great players for Golden State do what they did the first game, Golden State will clean out. I do wonder about Steph Curry. He has had a fairly horrendous 2 games of shooting, and I just wonder if he's not 100% back. But they still have Kevin Durant. They still have Klay Thompson. They still have Draymond Green. And they still have Iguodala. So, 2 of the best, or maybe 3 of the best 10 players in the NBA play and Golden State. So at least Houston's not down 0-2 heading out to Oakland, and the Celtics are up 2-0, and I would say they're in the catbird seat about right now.
They're looking good. So we'll know more next week, right?
Right.
So tell us about the book, and then where are we going on Sunday and Monday?
So it's finally here. My book will be published or available for purchase on May 21, The Complete Compliance Handbook. It's available on Amazon.com. I've got it linked to the show notes. If you want to buy it, if you'd like a autographed copy, you can order one directly from me on this website. Or if you're going to be in Washington at Compliance Week, I'm going to have a book signing party Monday from 2:15 to 2:45 at the Mayflower Hotel. I hope you'll drop by and pick up a copy if there are copies to be had. And they're going to have a sale price, which I won't tell you, that hopefully will attract you if you're going to come there. But it will certainly be worth your while to pick up a copy at Compliance Week. So very, very excited to get this book finally published, Jay.
Are you on one or several panels next week?
A couple of panels. I'm moderating one panel, and Louis Sapperman and I are going to talk about the convergence of various standards for compliance programs, the 10 hallmarks, the COSO framework, the OECD, et cetera. So that's a Tuesday morning breakfast, and my panel is at 10 o'clock Tuesday morning. Oh, Rod Rosenstein opens this conference on Monday as the keynote. So if you're going to be there at 9 o'clock, ready to listen to our Deputy Attorney General.
And maybe we'll sneak in a live podcast or two?
Well, certainly one.
Okay.
And certainly perhaps even, a live Facebook show.
That would be fun. So I am up in the city by the bay. There is SCCE San Francisco Compliance Conference one day, and we're going to hear about social media, privacy, engaging your board, and globalization and corporate social responsibility and human trafficking. So I think I've said this to you before, but it's always amazes me how SCCE can really put together a conference that's topically on point, and they are planning these things sometimes 6 or 9 months out. So kudos to them. And then I'd like to just run a quick pop quiz that I posted on LinkedIn earlier this week. And the pop quiz is Sunday night before Compliance Week. Do you get up early and do your cardio? Do you meet your compliance colleagues for a nightcap at the Edgar Bar? Or do you be a compliance rock star and do both? The orphan meetup tradition continues. So if you're in DC on Sunday night early for Compliance Week, please stop by the Edgar Bar between 9:30 and 12 midnight. Say hi to your old friends, not meaning old, but just people you know already, or make new friends. So we look forward to seeing everyone at Compliance Week. And Tom, how about we'll shake it up? Can you take it home tonight?
Sure. So on behalf of Jay Rosen, Mr. Monitors, this is Tom Fox, the Compliance Evangelist, wrapping up the week that was for May 18th, 2018 in our special Where's Uncle Duke When You Really Need Him edition of This Week in FCPA. Thanks so much for listening, and we hope you'll join us again when we report from Compliance Week 2018 next week. Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox again. I'd like to thank you for listening to this episode of This Week in FCPA. As I mentioned, my book will go on sale May 21. That's Monday, May 21. I hope you will check it out. It's available on Amazon.com under the title The Complete Compliance Handbook. If you'd like an autographed copy, I can arrange for that. You will have to purchase it from my site, www.fcpacompliancereport.com. This is the best one-volume compendium of all things of best practices to operationalize your compliance program. I know you will find it useful. Thank you again for listening to This Week in FCPA, and I hope you will join us again next week. This Week in FCPA is a part of the Compliance Podcast Network.